So I hope your pencils are ready, because you're going to work first and then I'm going to work second. I hope you're ready to start. You've got your pencils, brushes, pens, crayons, biros, anything. This, I'm going to sort of sneak up on these whales gradually, because if you're just, you know, out and about on a boat somewhere, this tends to be what you see. You tend to see the roundness of the arch of the back. You tend to see the distinguishing fin there, and you see them kind of rolling. So this is a really easy one to start with, and just to get you warmed up so that you can actually begin to feel your way in. Just notice the way the whale meets the waterline. There's a change of colour, there's the reflection of the whale, and there's that kind of hard line where the water meets the whale. And these whales are very scarred, I gather. They have little sharks and things nibbling at them from time to time. And it's one way that they can identify them, along with some of the nibbles that have been taken out of their dorsal fin. And there's these lovely, if you're doing tonal work, there's some lovely highlights around the fin and around the edge of the whale. So that's all you're getting on that one. Ready for the next? I'm keeping it easy and bringing you in gently. So there's a mother and calf. And again, lovely, just simple shapes. If you're working in colour, there's no blue in that one. It's all tonal work, all shades of grey. So it's quite a good idea there to kind of try and get those lovely sort of abstract patterns of the reflection of the fin in the water, where it kind of ripples and reflects, and that the kind of dark highlight of the dorsal fin against the light of the sky, and a little bit of background there. Okay, let's move on, because I'm going to get you gradually a little bit more complex. All these slides are from Falklands Conservation, from the work they do. So we're very lucky to have access to this. Now here's something more atmospheric. I'm going to give you 2 minutes on this one. You might like to just try getting a bit of that background in. This is a very dramatic shot. It's just the scale of the cliffs and that dark cliff against the sea, and then that lovely blurry kind of light in the whales below there. Now, depending on what media you're using, there are lots of ways you can get that. If I was doing this in pencil, I'd then get my rubber out and rub out nice and loosely that great gorgeous patch of glow. So again, it's simple, strong shapes. Don't forget that lovely little curl of the wake. What you're trying to draw with these things, we're trying to draw movements as much as anything else. And it's just this rolling kind of move that it has in the water. So really simple, but it's very atmospheric. And you notice the background cliffs are in this photograph darker than the tone of the whale. So you've really got sort of 3 or 4 tones in there. And getting the blurriness, if you're using watercolor, of course, you can wet that whole area and lift paint out. Okay, I'm going to stop you there and move on. Okay, again, this is, again, you only ever see part of the whale. So this is a slightly more elevated view now. This is the whale just beginning to dive. So just take your pencil or your brush for a walk. The nice thing is you're painting bits of animal. You can't see the whole creature. So you don't have to finish anything. You can just draw lines, gestures, the swirl as it moves through the water. Look at that lovely kind of wake that it leaves behind, and the ripples in the water, and that lovely bubble right over the head where it looks like she's just about to blow and go for it. So all you ever see is a little bit. But what this shows, oh, I forgot to tell you how much you're getting. You're getting another minute on this. What this shows is how enormous that head is, that huge, huge jawline. And I'll be showing you a little more about that in a bit. But when they open their mouth, they have the most enormous mouth. These are baleen whales, so they're filter feeders. They gulp in enormous quantities of ocean. Spit the water out again. guess who forgot to switch their phone off? Me. Spit the water out and then keep all the lovely little lobster krill that are kept behind. So their mouths are phenomenally big, and they've got this lovely kind of long line of the mouth. You can also perhaps try to catch the ripples of the water as they kind of ripple it over the animal's head there. And have you had enough? Shall I move on? Right, now we've gone up in the air now. We've got a sort of seagull's eye view here, and you can get the lovely shape from above, that sleek shape. And you've also got here these circular patterns in the water are their footprints. When they dive, they leave this perfect circle, which is rather lovely. So part of it, you're trying to show ripples of water underneath and on top of the animal, and I'm going to try and do a little bit of demonstration of that to give you a bit of a rest in a little while. So another minute on this one. But this is just about getting that feeling of movement and water. And if you look at the tail of the one on the left, where it's below the water, that shape is broken up into kind of jagged edges like a feather. And there's crisscross ripples everywhere. So you never actually draw the whole shape as a hard line. You're going to tail it off into a soft edge. Or if you're drawing in paint, you can just be very, very free with these. Just the kind of strength of this one is where that head on the left-hand one is emerging from the water. You've got that sleek kind of shape. You can see see the blowholes, that little kind of ridge on the top of his head ending in. It's got two blowholes like a little nose apparently. And it just shows that perfect symmetry from above. And that turbulence in the wake. If you're working in watercolors, you've always got a problem with getting that white on top of the blue. It's quite hard to leave white paper for that kind of thing. So I tend to cheat and get out some really chunky white wax crayons or kind of wax colors or acrylic and just scribble it on. Just don't be afraid to mix up the tools that you use. Anything, just try things. We're all telling each other to stay safe in our lives, but we don't want to stay safe when it comes to creativity. We want to just keep pushing. It's only paper. And I'm going to move you on from that one. I'm going to move him out of the way. Now you've got him slightly more sideways on, so you've got the line of that mouth. If you notice the way the mouth, it's quite a pointed nose, and that mouth goes all the way back. You can just concentrate on the head, and the rest, very obligingly, just fades out into the water. So you might like to indicate some of the ripples in that water. It's very calm that day. Indicate some of the ripples and some of the way that it just fades out. It's got a light coloured underside. And although we're very rarely going to see them from underneath, they've got that kind of lots of kind of ridges under the jawline. very traditional for whales. He's a very graceful one. Right, you've got and just a minute on this, so a little bit more time on this one. Now you notice you probably can't see the eyes, they're quite tiny, but you can just, if you look at the edge of the mouth, which just turns down, it's a kind of smirk, isn't it, he's doing? And then you've got the tiny little eyes, just so you can see them just at the edge of the mouth there. And again, the blowhole, you can just see it's just bubbling up. It's just about to have a big breathe out. And the fit, I'm going to show you the skeletal structure in a minute, and the hands are the little fins, and they're very close to the head. It's like having little hands coming out of our shoulders. If you're working in colour, think about the difference between that bluey grey of the whale and the kind of indigo of the sea. And the more you're doing all this speed drawing, your visual memory will be improving rapidly. And you'll probably find already, if you've been doing this with us before, that you're getting very good at finishing things off from memory after the event. There's only so much you can do in a minute. And it's really impossible to finish a picture in a minute, but you just get better at looking and noticing. And drawing is just a way of looking better. It's like the difference between hearing and listening. You're actually sitting down and listening to a piece of music rather than just having it wash over you. And I'm going to move on. Now, you don't need to draw this. You can if you want to, but just a little bit of extra information on the structure of these whales so that it can help you when you're trying to draw things that we can't see because they're all underwater. And you can start to see the shape of that mouth. And it doesn't have teeth, she has baleens, which are these huge, big kind of brush-like filters, which filter out all the food. And you can see how close the eye is to the end of the mouth and those ridges under the jaw. So I'm not going to linger on that one. I'm just going to, just for information, really. Linger a little bit more, all right. It's quite nice, isn't it? Okay, that's enough. Get a little bit more information now. This is again an odd angle of a whale. So you might like to do a quick sketch of this, and it's the mouth, it's lying on its side. It's just, I can't work out whether it's gulping in or gulping out, but it's doing what they call a lunge, and it's just scooping up stuff. And you can see it's an odd angle. You can see that kind of bit of the baleen there and the eye as it bulges a little from the side of the head. And it's quite dramatic. I mean, if you drew that, you wouldn't think it was a whale, but of course, if you draw an object from a different angle, you get a different shape. Drawing something is very single viewpoint. I'm not going to give you much longer on this, but it's the minute you've just got to keep looking afresh every time because every angle is a different picture. Different viewpoint, different shape. Right, moving on. I do want to just point out how enormous these jaws are. I mean, if you go to Port Stanley in the Falklands, there's the archway to the cathedral is a whale jawbone, and Michelle will tell us if this is right. But I think it's a blue whale jawbone. I could be wrong, but it's incredible archway. And whale jawbones are extraordinary, and they still litter some of the beaches there. And so you really, if you're drawing it, you think, actually, you've got to think the head is about a third of the body at least. I haven't measured exactly, but it's going to be that substantial. And you can see how these little tiny hands stick out from behind the ears. And so again, you've got this spine, and like all creature drawing, it's not a bad idea to start with the spine and that long, long ridge of the head and the top jaw. There's always structure. You want your drawings to feel three-dimensional and solid rather than just blobby. You want, these are huge, heavy animals, and it's quite hard on a two-dimensional piece of paper to get that across. But you can, as long as you get some of the feeling of it. I like that one of the jaw face on. You couldn't make that up, could you? It's like a creature from another planet. We tend to think of the oceans as out there and away, but we live on a watery planet, and these creatures are part of our world, even though we can't see them. And I'm moving on from there because that wasn't really for you to draw unless you really want to. I'm going to leave you with this, the last of the slides, before I do some drawing. Just another lovely, fairly simple atmospheric shot, just those 3 fins and 3 blows. Just have a think about what you might do with that, what you might do with it later when you've got some paints to hand, how you're going to get that lovely smoky effect of the whale's breath, and a little bit of the texture of that lovely Falklands hillside in the background, and a few ripples on the water. The water's really just going to be the white page in watercolors with a few little grey ripples on it. But those 3 fins, I love the way those fins are all different shapes, and Michelle will probably tell us that they do actually identify all these whales by the shape and all the marks in their individual fins, and that's how they recognise which ones come back year after year. And if everybody's ready now, I'm going to do some drawing, and you're all very welcome to draw along with me, and or just sort of watch and do your own thing or make notes, whatever you like. I'm just going to show you how I would approach drawing these whales, but really the principles of it apply to drawing anything. It's just a way of looking. So I'm going to swap cameras to the drawing board. Right, here we go. What I've got here, I've just got a little sketch that I did that Michelle says is reasonably close. I was just working on it. And I'm just going to go through the process of where do you start when you're looking at an animal. We've got the luxury of working from photographs. So you're just thinking, what do I start with? And the obvious thing, and I'm only going to keep this very brief because I want to get going on some videos for you in a few minutes. But the obvious thing is to just think, well, let's draw an outline. And that's not a bad place to start, but it can go wrong because you can get hooked in on the line you're drawing and then the proportions can go out. So I tend to look at the overall proportion first. Let me keep these both in shot. Here we go. And try to think, and the first thing I think about is how long is it compared to how wide is it? And I think Marianne was doing this on the cheetahs. What size box does it fit in? Because the essential, you know, you can get away with murder on accuracy in drawings. And really, you're not after accuracy. You're after that connection, that feeling that you've explored something visually, got to understand it a bit better. But it's quite nice to get the kind of truth of the thing, the core proportions right. So I tend to start by thinking, how long is it? You know, that would be too fat. And I don't use a rubber at this stage. I'm just making marks to just try, and it's almost like putting a camera into focus. And there's a little bit of a kind of fat bit at the end of the body there before the fluke kicks in. I'm just feeling my way into the shape. The tail is actually on the horizontal plane because it's the way the whale actually, it's the power of the whale. It just gives a really kind of up-down motion with that tail to move along. So if I draw it sideways on, that's going to be wrong. So I need to indicate that that's actually tilted that way. So I've tried to do that by showing the body overlapping it and a bit of foreshortening there. And it's quite good to get all these lines down. Don't rub anything out till later. If you do a wrong line, that's great, because then you'll know if you rub it out, you'll just go in the wrong place again. So just feeling my way in, going, is that the right shape? It's got a kind of ridge on its head, which peaks where the blowholes are. And then her back goes right down there. And the dorsal fin, you're always asking, how far is this compared to that? I'm asking how far down the back is a dorsal fin, and there it is. It's a lovely shape. It'd be a good, all you kayakers, fellow kayakers out there, it's a perfect kayak skeg shape. And it's quite small compared to some whales. So you're always flicking your eye around, comparing one bit to another bit. Let's get that shape of that mouth. It goes up and then it goes down. You talk to yourself in your head. Where does that go? Does it go up? Does it go down? Is it big? Is it small? How big is this compared to that? And as we saw from that jawbone, the head of the whale is quite substantial. It's, I don't know, quarter, just yeah, probably just over a bit more than a quarter of the size. And I gather on that one, my nose is just a little bit too blunt. And so I'm still not rubbing out, I'm just feeling my way in. And I don't want to go at this for too long because I want to get onto some videos and get you working again. But what I tend to do is I tend to kind of, it's nice to go in with tone so that you've got some feeling of substance and solidity there. And you can fade it out. And it makes you quite aware of if you're working from photos, of the variety of tone. If your paintings look flat, it's a good idea to working from photos, work from black and white photos, and then you really have to work your shades of light and dark. That's what makes us read things as round and three-dimensional. So I'm not going to, I would normally do this a lot slower, but we've only got an hour. And you can just kind of, you know, quite often hint at the speed, the fluidity, the motion. You could be quite free. I hold the pencil quite far back when I'm working like that so that it's not tight and detailed and fiddly, and then you can spend hours fiddling and find you've got it all wrong. At least these haven't got spots, eh?
Or whiskers.
Or whiskers, or fur. And you haven't got grassy, greeny stuff in the background. That's it for now because it's time to move on, but I'm just going to hint that what I did on this one, it's quite good when you're working a pencil line to just use the rubber as a mark making tool, and then you can just pull. I've got a little eraser here. Whoops, there it is. That's refillable eraser. So it's quite pointy. You can use the corner of your own eraser and you can just make marks. You can find all kinds of swirls like that. So don't be afraid to use an eraser as a drawing tool. And so I could do a whole day on drawing and frequently do, but I'm going to shut up and get you working again by coming back to the screen. And now it's video time, and those who've been before know that this is the way you really work hard. I want you to draw as we show some fantastic footage that Michelle's sent me. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? That's how big that mouth is. And I'm going to play this as a very short clip. But try and draw it. Try and catch him. Catch that movement. Catch that tail. Look at it. It's iconic. And it'll come again. Don't worry. It'll come again. These are fantastic shots. Try and draw him. Look at that mouth go. And I'm going to give you one more of that, and then we've got some lovely drone footage as well. But this is quite you can really just be very fluid with your brush or your lines, because it's almost just like you could just take a line for a walk, a curving line across. You can just take some lines for a walk across the page. Draw on top of drawings, just make it abstract, make it just a feeling of the thing. You're not after technical drawing here. This is just an experience. The more you draw, the better your recall gets. And I'm finding now I'm drawing less on location. I'm doing a few lines and then finishing off from memory when I get back. Once more on that one, then I've got to go to another one, because you might like to catch that fluid shape again. Look at him go.
And pause it.
Pause him in mid-gulp. Oh, no, that's not a good place to pause him. Let me pause him there. It's just the shape changes so much, isn't it? And yeah, I'm hoping you've got a happy, chaotic page full of mad lines and curves and fluid shapes and squiggles. Now this is lovely. I'm going to play this through once while you get a feel for it, and then once more. But look at that lovely shape from above. Those lovely footprints. I'll play it once through, then I'll play it again and pause it somewhere useful. Just keep your eye on the screen, take your brush for walk, take a line for walk. Just look at the ripples on the water and the way they break up the shape, and there's a hard line between where it's above the water and below. Aren't they just beautiful? They're just such graceful creatures. Now this is a nice bit, because it gives you, again, you've got it in context. If you want those distant hills, those cliffs, you've got them, or you can just focus on that movement, the ripples on the water. Move on a bit. Here it comes again. Just this slow, it does a kind of roll, doesn't it? So when you're trying to draw an animal, you don't want to draw something static. You might as well, that's for reference, a photo or a static picture. That's for anatomical study. When you're sketching these things, you're really about where it's been, where it's going, how it moves, how it kind of moves through the water, that kind of rolling, that slow rolling motion. We're trying to get what it feels like to actually watch this, really. And that lovely the last thing you see is the top of the fin. You've got that marking, you can see those markings on the back, that kind of chevron shape, and the ridge at the top of the head leading to the blowholes. So it's intriguing to try and sketch a creature that you can't actually see very much of, isn't it? You only get part of it at a time, which is quite good when you haven't got time to finish a whole drawing anyway. But I hope you've got something of the flavour of these, of the nature of them, of the feeling of how special all of these ocean creatures are, and how, if they're healthy, then and the ocean's healthy, we all stand a bit of a chance. And I'm going to stop that there, stop sharing. Okay, I'm going to get the colours out now. I'm going to get some paints out and just look at how you might I'm sure you've all been doing this probably a lot better than I have, how you might just approach that in colour. And I'm just going to go for just under 10 minutes, and then we can have some question time. So I'm going to draw very quickly and not particularly accurately, just a whale shape, because this is just the principle of how you might just go in quickly with some colour.
Are you sure that's not a surfboard?
It's not, excuse me, it's my kayak. No, it's it is good if you're working, you know, in something more finished, to just take a bit of time over the accuracy. If I'm working on good paper, I will quite often use tracing paper, draw it out on the tracing paper first, and then transfer that to the paper so that it doesn't actually get completely messed up. And at that stage, I would, if I'm on watercolor paper, get rid of the muzzy lines because I don't want them to get in the way. But this is really about getting colour on quickly and how to show an object that's underwater. So here's all my blues. Lots of, I urge you to experiment with blues. We did a bit of this before, didn't we, on our oceans ocean cam. And it's good to get some nice turquoisey ones down. And if you've got questions about colour, put them in the chat. That's a Windsor blue, green shade, but anything turquoisey is quite useful for this kind of deep water subject. And then I'm just going to throw it on. I'm going to stand up here. I'm making a mess. And it's quite nice to kind of leave some kind of bits of white paper showing. Lots of water. I'm kind of throwing water over the whole page, over the whole of the whale. Oh, another gin and tonic arrived. It's only terribly weak, really. We have to try and make sense on these things.
We try.
Try. Oh, God. So at that stage, the whole page is wet. I mean, if you're working on acrylic or oils, this is not relevant, but it's just how watercolor is so useful for anything to do with the sea and anything to do with water, because I can just trail more colors in and they will just give me that kind of feeling from that, like from those drone footage of that kind of rippling kind of texture. I'm going to put tiny bit of yellow in. So at the moment, that is very random, very fluid, semi-abstract, but I'm trying to show the whale sort of beneath the surface, and I'm going to leave that to dry because there's nothing else you can do to that until it's completely dry. And that one, a bit lighter, this one, I obviously wasn't feeling quite so splashy. But what I can do with this now, because I've put the colour of the water all over the whole thing, it's now quite easy to just get some of the whale colour itself. Can you see that? It's quite pale, that one. It'll darken up. It'll darken up. The colour of the whale is quite interesting to experiment with. Getting that colour grey for the whale, you've probably all got your recipes for grey. My go-to colour, I've played around with these say whale greys, and I decided on indigo and a bit of red. So it's a kind of purpley grey. So I can now put, oops, that's it. I can now put some of that colour on top. Flood it in, just get that shape. And then don't worry, this will end up back underwater when I've got the crayons out. And I'm using a big brush, and again I'm just blocking in that shape. Plenty of water on the palette. That's my watercolor palette. Very messy, big plate. But this is a lovely, it's fairly simple shape, you know, it's fairly forgiving. If it's not exactly what I'm drawing a say whale, Michelle will be far too polite to mention it. It's a species yet undiscovered. And you can get kind of lift paint off.
Thank you. You can vary the colour. And as long as it's all still wet, you can keep adjusting. What you can do at this stage is if she's just about to blow, let's have her blowing. I can actually just pull out some of that colour there to give myself space. So usually you can just really get away with a lot of throwing water around on this, and quite often if you just wet it, it will just try to show that she's just moving through the water really fast. Don't be afraid to experiment, you know, just get the feeling of it, see, because then they never stay still, do they? They're always going to be in motion, and when you see them, if they're coming to the surface, they're always in motion. And you might want to try some ripply motions. Watercolor is just lovely for this. Just take a wet brush, if you're trying this, or try it later, just take a wet brush and just sort of trail it through. If you trail it through the wet paint, it will actually just sort of pull that paint out and make it look hopefully like it's in motion. Too many strokes, but you get the idea. And then you've got that dappled effect on the body. Even just putting a tissue on it can help, like that, to show that some of it's underwater. And I would just build that up gently in layers. I'm rapidly running out of time as we do. So there was one more stage which I'd already done. Actually, no, I needed to put more paint on that. It's not dark enough. What I'm going to do is just before I stop, is to look at, let me get some pencils which are over here, how you can actually get some marks made on there to show the water coming through. And I use these watercolor pencils. It's just experimenting, it's just taking risks, saying what does this do, what does that do. And I've got various blues here and a white. So for the whale's blow, what I use there, I'll do it on here because it's a darker image. You can just do an awful lot with a white pencil. If you want those kind of ripples running through, putting a white line, white pencil on top of dark blue paint. It's also quite good for highlights. Can you see that? Yeah, quite a spin picture. So don't be afraid to mix it up. These blues are really nice because they're water soluble. So if I can just trail them through if I want lines of ripples. But because they're water soluble, if I take a brush onto them, then they'll dissolve into gorgeous colours. Now you don't have to dissolve them completely. It's quite nice to leave some of them untouched or some of them just smudged a little bit, but you can just create a kind of illusion of this water rippling over the whale. And just experiment. It's quite useful to build up this kind of picture in lots of layers. Let it dry, come back to it when it's dry and think, what else can I play with? These are quite good also for just drawing direct. These watercolor pencils, I use Darwin ink tents or various different makes, but worth a try. So if you're drawing really quickly, you can then, where's my brush? I lost my brush, there it is, in my hand. And then you can kind of smudge that outline and get something down really quickly. And so you could be a bit creative with colours. You're just really observing, playing, getting to know it. You'll never forget say whales now, you know, you realise. And I'm going to stop there because we haven't got much time left.